Welcome to our evening. I'm Johnny, and I want to introduce our night to you. Our whole year is intentional, and especially during this time, it's even more intentional. We have to take our faith seriously and really perform it to get the whole idea. And this happens in Holy Week, especially so. We aren't following Jesus in a do it yourself way. Instead, we're called to grow and move and walk and breathe with Christ. We actively pursue Jesus while meeting him through the changing of seasons, through death and rebirth. This Lent, we move with Christ through our suffering and our loneliness and even our isolation, as is evident even in the way that we're meeting tonight. Christ suffered as we suffer. Christ thus offers our suffering meaning. This year, it's even more important to be intentional. May Christ meet you in your physical quarantine. This Holy Week, we watch with Christ from his triumphal entry into Jerusalem. We welcomed him as a redeemer, as a savior, as a ruler by his people. And then the final meal happened last night that he shared with his followers before being betrayed and handed over to the authorities. He went from triumph to betrayal, revolution to execution, communion to abandonment. As we follow Christ through his last week, may we remain with Christ through his final hours on the cross. The crucifixion of Jesus is too often an ornamented event. But indeed, the crucifixion of God is a shameful one. Jesus cries out in pain and in agony. It is a dark event. It is one to mourn, especially on this day. Its glory will come later, but tonight stand in grief on this dreadful evening. As Christ hung on the cross, the gospel writers record him making 7 final statements, each of which we will spend time with tonight. And as the evening progresses, we will descend with Christ towards death through images, litanies, prayer, and song. And each of the candles that you see represents one of those words. And as we move through the night, we will extinguish these candles to symbolize our descent into darkness and isolation, into the tomb. As our time together draws to a close, stay in that darkness and isolation as we move into the weekend, with some mystery suspending us, not knowing quite what's next.
From Luke 23, verses 26 through 34. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" And two others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place that is called Golgotha, or the skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Please join us in this litany as we seek forgiveness for ourselves and for our world. Where we should have stewarded, we exploited. Where we should have protected, we left vulnerable. Where we should have respected, we chose to disregard. Father, forgive us. For the gray smog skies and the air we cannot breathe, for the growing red tides and the oil-soaked shores. Father, forgive us. For the unchecked powers that fill in valleys and tear down mountains to sustain our lives. Father, forgive us. For the battles that erupt in our greed for resources, for the violence inherent in our scarcity mindset. Father, forgive us. For if we do all this when the world is green, how much more so when the world is dry? Father, forgive us, for we do not know what we are doing. So let's sit in the silence and contemplate the ways that we hurt others, or participate in systems that hurt our neighbors, even when we don't intend to. Let's reflect on that, but let's also remember that Jesus extends his forgiveness to us. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing.
From Luke 23:36-43. The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." And there was also an inscription over him, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals who was hanging there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are the same under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." And then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Join me in this song. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom.
After the body of Emmett Till was pulled from the Tallahatchie River, his mother, Mamie, decided to have an open casket funeral so the world would see what had been done to her little boy. We look upon her face today and we witness her suffering. In the past few weeks, COVID-19 has been sweeping through the Philadelphia incarceration system. These people do not have the choice to stay home. Instead, they are forced into a tomb-like existence. There are mothers in prison writing goodbye letters to loved ones they may never see again. There are sons in prison writing letters to mothers they may never see again. We hear their cries and we remember their suffering. Mary, the mother of Jesus, stood at the foot of the cross watching her son, her child, die. The child she carried, birthed, and nourished. We remember her suffering and grief, and we remember the countless Black and brown mothers who have to watch their babies die within a system bent on crucifixion. In John 19:26-27, we read of the woman at the cross. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple with whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to his disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his home.
At the cross her station keeping, stood the mournful mother weeping, close to Jesus to the last. Through her heart his sorrow the sword had passed. Oh, how sad and sore distress was that mother highly blessed, of the sole begotten one, Christ above in tormenting, she beneath beholds the pain of her dying glorious Son. Is there one who would not weep, wound in misery so deep, Christ's dear mother to behold? Can the human heart refrain from partaking in her pain, in that mother's pain untold? Bruised, blinded, first defiled, she beheld her tender child, all with bloody scourges rent, for the sins of his own nation, saw him hang in desolation, till his spirit forth he sent. Holy Mother, pierce me through, in my heart each wound renew, of the Savior crucified. Make me feel as thou hast felt, make my soul to glow and melt with the love of Christ our Lord. Let me share with thee his pain, who for all my sin was slain, who for me in torments died. Let me mingle tears with thee, mourning him who mourned for me, all the days that I may live.
At noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And at 3 in the afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? In his last moments, Jesus quoted Psalm 22 in a moment of complete despair and aloneness. Maybe he drew comfort from the imagery of the psalm, which moves from despair to hopefulness in God's saving power. Or maybe he was repeating the only words that seemed to reflect the depth of his sadness. My God, why have you abandoned me? Saying these words in his mother tongue. Let's sing these words together in this sung psalm. And as we do, we'll reflect on our own feelings of being alone and isolated. And as we do, we remember that Jesus too has felt this way. My God, why have you abandoned me? My God, why have you abandoned me? All who see me scoff at me. They mock me with parted lips, they wag their heads. He relied on the Lord, let him deliver him. Let him rescue him if he loves him. My God, why have you abandoned me? Indeed, many dogs surround me. A pack of evildoers closes in upon me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. My God, why have you abandoned me? They divide my garments among them, and for my vesture they cast lots. But you, O Lord, be not far from me. O my help, hasten to aid me. My God, why have you abandoned me? I will proclaim your name to my brethren. In the midst of the assembly I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, give glory to him. My God, why have you abandoned me?
After this, Jesus, knowing that all was now finished, said, I thirst. A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked it in a sponge. Put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant and then lifted it to Jesus's lips. Take a moment to settle in the space that you're in. Maybe firmly plant your feet on the ground. Take a deep breath in and look around the space that you're in. Take a moment to feel the sensations that you're feeling in that space. Take a moment to reflect on the experiences that you have in that space. Maybe you're in your kitchen and thinking of the delicious meals that you share with your family. Maybe you're in your bedroom and you're thinking of the rest that you associate with that room. Now take a deep breath in, and we're going to do a guided meditation with one another. Remember that each physical sensation you feel, that God knew it too. Jesus said, "I thirst." As you sit in your homes, contemplate your own thirst and the demands that your body makes of you. Take this moment to become aware of your own breath. Stop and feel the aches of your own body. And then, for the next moment in this silence, welcome your personal thirst. The powers of the world hung our Jesus and gave him sour wine when he said, "I thirst." In the next period of silence, pray for those in the world who are suffering because of hunger and because of thirst. Jesus suffered as they suffered. And Jesus said, "I thirst." In this time of isolation, we search for the waters of community. Separated from our loved ones, our lives can feel so hollow and so dry. We thirst for our friends and for our families. In this final time of silence, reflect on the ways we thirst for one another. On the cross, separated from his friends and from his family, and separated from God, Jesus said, I thirst.
From John 19, verse 30. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, "It is finished." With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they nailed him to the tree? you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Oh, sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. Were you there when they pierced him in the side? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb? Were you there when they laid him in the tomb?
It was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, for the sun stopped shining. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two, and Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." When he had said this, he breathed his last.